if I seem a little down for this one, it's because I just finished watching the show and it is a lot. Emotionally, it's a lot. And I know I start most of my reviews with like hooks and stuff and like to keep it entertaining, but I can't bring myself to do that for the show. Under the trailer for the show, you'll see people commenting and they're like, oh, I was 5 when this happened, I was in school when this happened, my parents told me about this when I came home from playing, and my friends were at the theater but they got out and all of that. Then just something about that in itself is just so heartbreaking. And yeah, hi, I'm Pratiksha Mishra and you're watching my review of Trial by Fire. Let's talk about a few shows, right? There's Trial by Fire, there's Mai, there's the show that I'm binging, Ginny and Georgia, there's Drishyam. The main thing on all of these shows is that whole thing about how far does a parent go for their kids. But I think the most thematically similar to Trial by Fire would be Mai. In Mai, Sakshi Tanwar as Sheel is trying to figure out why her daughter was killed and essentially then go on kind of like a revenge saga. In Trial by Fire, there are two parents who know how their kids were killed but are trying to kind of get justice for them. Trial by Fire, directed by Prashant Nair and Randeep Jha and created by Nair and Kevin Lupercio, I hope I'm saying that right, is based on the Uphaar cinema tragedy that happened in Delhi in 1997. Scores of people entered the theatre to watch the film Border, the hit film Border, and many did not make it out because of a fire that broke out. Let's talk about the show's name in itself. What is a trial by fire? When we hear trial by fire, we kind of think of someone as being put through a grueling test to test their courage, test their fortitude, and that's exactly what happens here. Before I go into how the show is as a whole, let's talk about the main cast. Abhay Deol as Shekhar is brilliant in the show. There is, I have some issues with the way the dialogues are delivered and just it feels a little inauthentic in places, but his body language is brilliant in this show, and I think that's more important to how the show plays out. This might be Abhay Deol's best performance, one of his career best performances, and even so, he is not the best performance in Trial by Fire. That award clearly goes to Rajshri Deshpande as Neelam. Neelam is essentially a mother who has lost her kids and is trying to get justice for them in a system that is just not working in their favor, and she does that brilliantly. ऐसा लगता है कि once she lost her kids, she lost everything except the fight for justice. We see her just go through motions like ऐसा clockwork की तरह कि ये करना है फिर ये करना है फिर ये करना है, and that's all that goes on. You slowly see her kind of lose herself to her grief while also gaining her fighting spirit, and it's brilliantly shown in this show. And I know saal abhi shuru hi hua hai, but this is one of those performances that you'll probably remember till January 2024. It's going to make it to all of those best performances of the year wale lists. I'm convinced. Let's go into the story as a whole. Starting with, we see the main storyline, right, of these two parents who are dealing with the loss of having lost their children, but also with the bureaucracy and how the justice system works and how they're kind of stuck into that. A lot of that is happening. There's corruption happening. They're fighting huge powers, right? And the idea of loss, by the way, this idea of loss is shown very, very well, and kudos to director and the writers of the show for that. But we also see other stories that are going on. We don't see the actual fire properly till the very end, which is ironic because that's just where the tragedies start. Right? After the fire, there's the yahan ka chakkar, wahan ka chakkar, tareek pe tareek, and all of that is still going on. Also tragedies. The show very much depends on empathy though. There's a strong sense that the director and the makers trust the audience to feel empathy, and I don't know if that works for the show as a positive, because maybe it alienates a part of the audience that might not essentially feel as strongly as the other part might. But I do love the way that the story is told, but I'll get into that later. In a later episode, there's Rajesh Talang who plays a technician जिसके सर पे basically सबका इल्जाम लगने वाला है. In the trailer also they kind of say कि इसमें there's not just one person who is responsible, and that's shown in the story as well कि ऐसे बहुत aspects हैं to a tragedy and you can't really pin it on oh this person did this and that's how it turned out. Right? But still पूरा का पूरा इल्जाम इस पे डालने वाले हैं essentially. And we see how he deals with that. His viewing of the tragedy then is very different from the one that we see in our first few episodes. Uske baad in another episode there's also the couple that we see, Ratna Pathak Shah and Anupam Kher, brilliant acting. They're great. There's not much to debate about that. They're playing a retired army personnel and his wife, and we see how their marriage is suffering while they become parts of this tragedy. Very similar to the way we see it happen in Don Palathara's Everything is Cinema, where we see resentment kind of seep into a marriage and how that works. So marriage and tragedy is something that's also explored in this show. Trial by Fire, even with all of this, doesn't make it seem like वो कुछ ज़्यादा ही करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं. Their focus is just on humans. We see this one person who has lost his entire family to the fire, and उनके पास इतने पैसे भी नहीं है अभी कि he can conduct like funerals for his family. So we notice how these people that we started the story with are in a position of privilege. तो नीचे और भी stories हैं, and all of that is done very well in this show. There are issues with the show, of course. There's a problem of pacing a little bit, because at one point you will feel like, oh, this is going on a little too long, या एक episode में किसी एक चीज़ पे बहुत ज़्यादा focus है, that was not necessary. But all of this kind of gets overshadowed by the fact कि show है बहुत बढ़िया. I personally do watch a lot of true crime, but this show isn't true crime in that essence. True crime के जो genre है उसका एक success rate जो है, there's a reason behind it. It's gripping, it's immersive. You want to find out कि what happened, how did it end. There are of course multiple reasons for why people watch true crime. But this show goes the other route. It's showing you the grassroots नीचे. क्योंकि ऐसे shows में ना, there's a lot of ways you can go. There's the investigation route, the true crime route, then there's the personal route, right? Sometimes these can mix and intermix, that happens. This show focuses solely on the personal part. And for this, and just the sensitive way in which tragedy has been dealt with, my rating for Trial by Fire is 4 stars out of 5.